Europe stands at a defining moment in its economic history. Once the center of global industry and trade, the continent now finds itself torn between two powerful forces: the urgent drive for a green transition and the slow decline of its industrial base. Supporters of the European project see the Green Deal as a moral and strategic necessity to fight climate change and secure energy independence. Critics, however, warn that rising costs, deindustrialization, and declining competitiveness could push Europe into a long period of stagnation. The stakes are global because Europe remains the world's second-largest economy, shaping trade flows, regulatory standards, and the balance of power in the international system. The European Green Deal is one of the most ambitious policy frameworks ever created. Its goal is to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, transforming energy systems, transportation, agriculture, and industry. The EU has implemented carbon pricing, strict emissions targets, and large subsidies for renewable energy and electric vehicles. On paper, this strategy positions Europe as a climate leader, but the costs are massive. Compliance increases, production costs for companies, adds bureaucratic complexity, and in many cases forces industries to relocate production to regions with cheaper energy and looser regulations. At the same time, China is flooding global markets with low-cost solar panels, batteries, and electric cars, leaving Europe caught between moral leadership and economic vulnerability. Germany, Europe's industrial powerhouse, illustrates the challenges of the transition. Its automotive sector, long the pride of German engineering, is struggling to adapt to electric vehicles, where China already dominates. High energy prices, worsened by the end of cheap Russian gas, are hitting the chemical, steel, and glass industries. Factories are relocating to the United States, where energy is cheaper and subsidies are larger, or to Asia, where labor costs are lower. This decline threatens not only economic growth, but also millions of jobs and the stability of entire regions dependent on industrial production. Without a strong Germany, the rest of the European Union risks falling into long-term stagnation. Energy lies at the heart of Europe's dilemma. The rapid move away from fossil fuels was accelerated by the war in Ukraine, which cut off Europe's reliance on Russian gas. While renewable energy capacity is expanding, it cannot yet provide stable and affordable supply at scale. As a result, Europe has turned to costly imports of liquefied natural gas, much of it from the United States. This shift has geopolitical consequences. Europe's dependence on foreign energy weakens its bargaining power and exposes its industries to price shocks. Unlike the US, which enjoys domestic energy abundance, or China, which secures resources through long-term agreements, Europe faces a structural disadvantage that could undermine its competitiveness for decades. Europe has long been a hub of scientific discovery and technological innovation. Yet today, the gap with the United States and China is widening. In artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and biotechnology, Europe lags behind both in private investment and in the scale of its companies. The fragmented nature of the European market, heavy regulation, and slower adoption of new technologies have reduced productivity growth. This matters because productivity is the engine of long-term prosperity. Without breakthroughs in innovation and higher efficiency, Europe risks falling behind in the industries that will define the future economy. Demographics add another layer of strain. Europe's population is aging rapidly, with a shrinking workforce and rising pension and healthcare costs. Countries like Italy, Spain, and Germany are already seeing declining birth rates and labor shortages in key sectors. Immigration has softened the impact, but political resistance to large-scale migration limits its potential as a solution. As industries shrink and energy prices rise, inequality within Europe is increasing. Wealthier regions in Northern and Western Europe adapt more easily, while Southern and Eastern economies struggle with slower growth and higher unemployment. This divergence fuels political tension inside the EU, empowering populist movements that challenge Brussels' authority. The risk is that economic pressures could undermine European unity itself, creating divisions at the very moment the continent needs cooperation to compete globally. Europe's economic trajectory cannot be understood without examining its energy dependence. The continent's reliance on imported natural gas and oil, particularly from Russia before the Ukraine war, exposed deep vulnerabilities. The sudden shock of energy price spikes in 2022 forced industries to cut production, households to reduce consumption, and governments to spend billions in subsidies. This crisis revealed how fragile Europe's energy security is, and how directly it ties into industrial competitiveness. While the green transition aims to reduce fossil fuel dependence, the rapid move toward renewables faces challenges of intermittency, storage, and supply of rare minerals. Without a balanced strategy that ensures both sustainability and reliability, Europe risks weakening its industrial base while still remaining exposed to geopolitical shocks. Europe's share of world GDP has been steadily declining, now below 15%. While it remains a major exporter, its global influence is shrinking compared to the United States and China. Geopolitical risks, from the war in Ukraine to trade disputes and the weaponization of supply chains, add further uncertainty. Countries across the world are less willing to adopt European standards if they see the continent losing economic weight. The euro remains important, but it lacks the global dominance of the US dollar. If Europe cannot secure its competitiveness, its role in the world order will diminish, reducing both its economic and political power. Some analysts compare Europe's current situation to Japan's stagnation after the 1990s. Both face aging populations, high debt, and industrial decline. Yet Europe's challenges are compounded by its fragmented political structure and the complexity of balancing 27 national economies under one currency. Unlike Japan, Europe lacks a single strong fiscal authority and depends heavily on consensus, which slows down reforms. On the other hand, Europe retains strengths: a highly educated workforce, advanced infrastructure, and leadership in areas like renewable energy and sustainable design. The question is whether these strengths will be enough to offset the structural risks of stagnation. The future of Europe depends on the path it chooses in the coming decade. If it can balance the green transition with industrial competitiveness, invest in innovation, and reform its labor markets, Europe can remain a global economic power. If not, it risks following a trajectory of slow growth, deindustrialization, and declining influence on the world stage. This is more than an economic question. It is a civilizational one. Europe's choices will determine whether it remains a center of prosperity, technological leadership, and cultural influence, or whether it becomes a secondary player in a world dominated by others. The urgency comes from the narrowing window of opportunity. Climate deadlines, demographic pressures, and global competition are moving faster than Europe's political machinery. The continent must decide whether it will embrace bold reforms, empower its businesses to innovate, and allow markets to adapt freely to new realities, or whether it will remain trapped in a cycle of regulation, high costs, and political hesitation. If Europe succeeds, it could lead the world by demonstrating that sustainability and growth are not mutually exclusive. If it fails, the risk of an extended period of stagnation and irrelevance becomes very real. Europe now stands at a true crossroads, one road leading toward renewal, resilience, and global leadership, the other toward decline, fragmentation, and long-term stagnation. The decision it takes will shape not just the future of its citizens, but the balance of the global economy in the 21st century. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And tell us in the comments, do you think Europe can successfully balance its green transition with industrial strength, or is the continent heading toward long-term stagnation?